Coach Kolton here. We help people build physiques that money cannot buy, and 88% of our clients are successful in meeting their goals in 12 weeks. If you're interested in working with us, please follow the links down below. I'm going to label this video the Estrogen Toolkit so that you can have this in your back pocket for whenever it might be necessary. The management of the entire endocrine system is extremely vital to understand as an athlete, and so it's kind of complex. This is just one axis of it, but understanding this one can manipulate various other ones like progesterone or even prolactin. No secret that us bodybuilders are using performance-enhancing drugs, leveraging that to, well, enhance our performance. The thing is, however, is biology doesn't give free lunch. Altering your body by pulling any one lever that you can with exogenous hormones is indefinitely going to affect another region of the body with various different forms of crosstalk. One of these is specifically estrogen. We see lots of bodybuilders with gynecomastia or the development of male breast tissue, bodybuilders who are bloated and have faces that look like pillows. And while this is being said, estrogen is vitally important, and I'll tell you why. Estrogen plays a vital role in lipid metabolism, the binding affinity of androgen, bone mineral density, the protection of neurons, glucose metabolism, conversion of growth hormone into IGF-1 within the liver, and overall just a sense of well-being. It also plays an integral role in libido, which most people don't think of. They think of testosterone being the primary driver of libido, but the reality is it's likely more attached to estrogen, as well as it helps the pancreas regulate insulin production and overall energy balance in itself. So estrogen, while it seems like a bad idea to have rather high, we get a lot of benefits from having it within physiological ranges. Suppressing it is not the answer, and this is why this toolkit's really important to understand. Now, what's removed from the conversation usually is balancing estrogens and androgen. Usually people will just throw some sort of AI at the situation or completely remove testosterone or do something drastic, whereas you could normally just balance the equation between estrogens and androgens to find a net neutral outcome. There's three types of estrogens. I'm not going to get into the specifics of each of them. There's estradiol, which is the one that we're most concerned with, and that's labeled as E2 typically on blood work. There's estriol, and there's estrone, or E1. These guys come from the lovely pathway of steroidogenesis, where all molecules start from the basic compound cholesterol and then derive themselves into other forms of sex hormones through all of the cool interactions that happen through enzymes and cascades alike. Now, where E2 is primarily coming from is aromatase activity. Aromatase is an enzyme that our body produces to convert and cleave testosterone into estrogen. The more aromatase you have, the more estrogen you will have. Now, many tissues in the body have aromatase, to include the gonads, the brain, blood vessels, but most importantly, adipose tissue is where a lot of the production of aromatase enzymes are coming from. This is why having a higher body fat is actually very deleterious to a bodybuilder in his off. As well, our subcutaneous layer of skin has a response of producing aromatase enzymes as well in inflamed periods of time. So if you've ever gotten injured, you might have noticed, I think Vigorous Steve talks about this, he developed gynecomastia when he injured himself, and that's a very plausible thing. When you get injuries, your skin creates inflammation. Those inflammatory cytokines are helping in the production of aromatase enzyme. Needless to say, this stuff can be produced in many different ways, and it's worth understanding all of the different axes that they can come from. I want to touch on the first series of compounds that you can use to really leverage managing your estrogen without having to jump to conclusions with an aromatase inhibitor or something much more drastic. These compounds aren't usually spoken about and aren't usually seen as the first line of defense when it comes to potentially higher estrogen levels than necessary. However, it's really important to understand that before we dive into this, getting blood work is the key solution to making sure you understand what's going on, because sometimes high estrogen symptoms can be conflated with nutrient deficiencies, or sometimes high estrogen symptoms can be conflated with low estrogen, and you might not actually even have high estrogen. So jumping to an AI or something that's going to inhibit estrogen is probably not the solution right away. You want to see where it's at so that you have a clear and defined path to move forward with. Here's like the first line of defense list: apigenin, catechin, mangosteen, nicotine, resveratrol, vitamin E, zinc, and magnesium. Now, all of these are different chemicals. Obviously, magnesium, zinc, things like that are going to be biased more towards the vitamins and mineral side of things that are essential for our bodies. So if you're deficient in them, it can displace estrogen metabolism. Prior are going to be phytochemicals that actually interact at a cellular level with how we metabolize estrogen. So it's really important to, maybe if you're experiencing issues, make sure your micronutrients are adequately placed first and foremost, and make sure you're using something like chronometer to adequately gauge your nutrition through your meal plan. Secondly, these phytochemicals can initiate cascades that might benefit us in maintaining a homeostatic estrogen level, which is always the goal. Now, there's other compounds that we can use that are more specifically designed to helping out estrogen metabolism and excreting that estrogen. One of those is DIM, or dianyl methane, I believe it's called. This comes from a lot of cruciferous vegetables. It's another phytochemical, but it has a really important role to play with estrogen metabolism. DIM has a really cool effect where it can keep estrogen within neutral ranges. It doesn't let it get too far out of range, nor does it let it get too low. I will say that this is a very, very modest compound, and it's not going to completely change the game if you're way out of range. DIM inhibits the aromatase enzyme activity, so you're actually preventing testosterone from even being converted into estrogen in the first place. And it can also act as more potent forms of estrogen, so disenabling them from attaching to receptors and putting forth their effects. But that being said, taking too much DIM can initiate negative effects that would be related to too high of estrogen. So getting within a range that's adequate for you is really, really important. Something around 100 milligrams twice a day, at most 200 milligrams twice a day. The other one is calcium deglucarate, or CDG. Calcium deglucarate supplies glucarate for the detoxification process of estrogen. It allows the kidneys to facilitate the process of its removal much more rapidly than what your body would normally be doing. Its maximum effect is reached at higher doses, so you're looking to be upwards of 1,000 milligrams. So basically we're preventing an inhibition of estrogen excretion by providing glucuronidine, which is going to allow for the glucuronidation of estrogen and then its excretion through the kidneys. However, if too high of a dose of calcium deglucarate is used, it can start detoxing other pathways within the body. And we certainly don't want to do that too much, because then you'd be excreting things like probably DHEA, various forms of free testosterone, and other different metabolites within the body. Twice a day at about 500 milligrams of DIM would be a really good choice if you're experiencing high or low estrogen levels. Now we'll get more into the pharmaceutical side of things, where you can really leverage these tools to blast your estrogen. Now this is more of a second line of defense, but really this is a good option because you're not necessarily pulling away from the aromatase enzyme action, you're just inhibiting it through the utilization of other androgens. Things like mysterolone or proviron, things like methanolone or primobolan, and things like drostanolone like winstrol or mastron. And even equipoise in some contexts might actually inhibit aromatase activity. So the reason that this is a useful trick in using these compounds is, let's say you have a cycle going on where you have like 400 milligrams of testosterone and you are looking to actually up the dose. But at 400 milligrams of testosterone, you're having estrogenic side effects and you're developing gyno. What you could do in this instance is place another 300 milligrams of primobolan or mastron or equipoise in, and might find that you have an estrogen neutralizing effect. So you push your estrogen back into range with adding these reversely inhibiting aromatase enzyme, pushing your estrogen back into range with these compounds that reversely bind to the aromatase enzyme, inhibiting the production of estrogen, and then getting subsequently more anabolism out of your current cycle, as opposed to throwing back more aromatase inhibitors, inhibiting potentially the conversion of growth hormone into IGF-1 and various other things. Bringing us to aromatase inhibitors, it's important to understand that your estrogen levels need to be somewhere between 30 to 55 picograms per milliliter, or at a maximum 75 to 100 picograms per milliliter. You really have to find out what works best for you and where your homeostasis is, because for mine, personally, I can go pretty high and feel just fine. I don't develop gyno. I have great mood, energy, and focus. I like it on the higher end. Some individuals actually prefer it on the lower end. So it's really inter-individual, and you need to test this for yourself. Again, the importance of blood work here is super, super important, because if you're just randomly throwing aromatase inhibitors down your throat, you could be doing something to your estrogen level that is not advantageous to growth in and of itself, because estrogen, as we've said before, is extremely vital to the human physiology, as well as it acts on its own independently to anabolize tissue. Basically, we're looking at Arimidex, letrozole, and aromasin. These are the essential compounds that are going to really, really floor your estrogen levels. And you need to be very careful in using these. What I typically recommend is use the lowest effective dose infrequently and see what happens. Like, start with just dosing one time per week, watch what your estrogen does, retest maybe 3 weeks later and see where you're at. Maybe that 1 pill a week is enough to bring you within range, and then having done 2 to 3 or 4 pills a week might be too much and advantageously not giving you the amount of estrogen that you need, suppressing it too much, which is just generally not a good idea unless maybe you're at the last couple weeks of a contest prep. And then there's this big debate right now, which is kind of my last point here, whether you need to have estrogen high or low. And I've already stated that it depends on you as an individual and what your physiological state is best found at. However, there's tons of research to show that low estrogen is horrible. Like, it just destroys lipid metabolism. You develop cardiovascular disease. It's no bueno. The reason men have cardiovascular disease more over than women is likely because of their lower estrogen levels. But what's important to note here is that higher estrogen levels also correlate with lots of negative things, specifically a lower ejection fraction of the heart, which is like the main concern for bodybuilders. So if you're letting estrogen redline, the potential is that you're probably going to be having a low ejection fraction and potentially even predisposing yourself to heart failure. And we see this in tons of research. Heart failure patients have extremely high estrogen. We don't want that, right? So keeping your estrogen within physiological range is extremely important. People vouch for too high, people vouch for too low. Keep it in range as much as you can, because that's where the benefit is going to be had from having enough estrogen. Not too high, not too low, just right, the Goldilocks zone. Lastly, if you are experiencing gynecomastia, there's a lot of different reasons this could be happening, and estrogen always isn't the main driver. Sometimes we need to look at things like prolactin, progesterone, IGF-1, growth hormone, and even inflammation locally to that area. There's lots of inputs to growth signaling around breast tissue, and sometimes estrogen is not the only culprit. Using things like Novadex or tamoxifen are great, but the problem is it's not addressing the main issue. It's just binding to the estrogen receptor itself, not allowing estrogen to actionably affect the tissue. You need to have an aromatase inhibitor on hand in case it gets to that point. A SERM like Novadex will definitely block and keep you safe for the time being, but make sure that you have an Arimidex on hand or something like that so that you can lower your estrogen much more rapidly, get it back into physiological range, and then get off Novadex. We have seen that Novadex reduces.
My camera embarrassingly died halfway between this, but the point I was making before it did die is that the gynecomastia is developed by stimuli externally being placed onto your breast tissue, whether that be estrogen, IGF-1, growth hormone, or inflammation in and of itself. So yes, SERMs are indeed going to block the estrogen receptor and allow that estrogen not to inscriptionally create activity there, but it's not addressing the primary issue. You have too much estrogen if your tits are itchy, sore, whatever. So hopefully this is a good guide as an estrogen toolkit for you to manage your cycle and estrogen levels. The biggest key I can give you here is do blood work and do it frequently to give you the best results possible. Please check out my website, bloodbuildcoaching.com. I post all of these blogs there in written formats, so you can see all of this information there and read it if that is more your kind of learning style. Lastly, I do accept new clients, and right now we have an awesome offer going. If you'd like to learn more, please use one of the links down below to contact me and hear out what we can do for you.